All rise. The Honorable Judgey Therapist Vernique Esther presiding.
Hello, everyone, be seated. Today, we'll be reviewing the case of the people versus at Listen to Your Single Friend. Please state your case.
So I just got into a fight with my date and I just left.
Okay.
So, long story short, I met a guy on the app like a week ago. And we've been like talking on the phone a couple days this week. We agreed to meet up today, Friday at 7:30. I didn't hear from him today, the day of the date. We talked last night for like 10 minutes, but I didn't hear from him today. And I'm an anxious attachment girly. So, I need some reassurance today of like, especially for a first date. We've never met in person before. We met online. So I was like, I need to know that we're still going.
I have thoughts about this that we'll cover later, but this whole idea that when a date is set, an appointment, for lack of a better word, why do we need so many confirmations? The day of, the day before, I'll be back before y'all get y'all panties in a bunch. I'll be back to that.
So I'm trying to get out of my own way. So I text him, even though I didn't want to. I text him,
Taking
and I'm
initiative.
just like, hey, we're still going. Haven't talked to you today. So, I want to make sure we're, still on. And he's just like, oh yeah, it's been a busy day. I can call you right now. And I was just like, oh no, that's good. Like, I really appreciate it. That was a green flag to me that he, was like, oh no, it's just been busy. I can catch up with you right now. And so that was a green flag for me. But I ended up getting ready. And I was running a few minutes behind, and I just told him, after I had sent that text, like, I have a 40-minute drive, so I just wanted to make sure, and that's important. So hold on to that.
Holding.
So I get ready. I'm a few minutes late. 7:30 we were supposed to meet up. 7:35 was about my ETA. So I'm communicating the entire time. I want to be the communicator that I want. I want people to communicate with me a certain way, so I communicate with them that way. So I'm communicating with him the whole time. He says he's there. I said, okay, I'm going to be there I'm pulling up in 5 minutes. I'm about to get off the highway. So then he tells me, oh, we have a 35-minute wait. We can go walk around the mall. So y'all are going to be pissed off at me probably, but okay. I did what I did. I end up just telling him, like, well, at first I was just like, I called him, and I'm literally like pulling up into, if you're in the DMV area, I live in Baltimore County, we met up in Arundel Mills. So I'm pulling up, and it's a complicated parking situation, and I'm just like, why was there no reservation made? Oh, I've been here multiple times. I never had to make a reservation. It's Friday. They're busy. It's a restaurant. Like, he's just like super aloof, just like, it's no big deal, whatever. And I'm just like, I drove 40 minutes. It is the evening. I am not interested in walking around the mall, like, while we wait another 40 minutes for our reservation. Like, and so I'm just like expressing my frustration to him and just saying, like, like, I feel a little silly right now because I just drove a really long way and like you didn't even make a reservation. And so he's just like, well, just park, just get situated. Like, we'll, like, it's not that, basically just saying like it's not that big of a deal. And I'm just like, it kind of is though, because I just drove a really long way and I just like, I feel a little played right now. And I'm just like, you know what? Let me take a beat. I was like,
played is a really strong word here. And I think this speaks to kind of like the overinflation that happens, I think in part due to social media, but played, okay.
Like, I think I told him straight up, I'm not going to be a good date to you. I was like, I'm not really happy that I drove all this way and that, like, I have to wait 40 more minutes. And I was like, I'm just going to take that time and go back home. So I know y'all going to probably think I was snobby for that, but I'm sorry.
Okay. We're mad that we drove almost 40 minutes and have to wait 35 minutes. And the result is to just go home for 40 minutes. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Please continue.
We can blame it on me being hangry or whatever, but I'm just like, I know
Snickers,
myself,
maybe.
and like, we're already in the negatives. There's no reason for me to sit here and wait with this man knowing that I'm not going to give him a fair chance. I know myself. I said, let's just reschedule. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm just really frustrated about this. So he ends up, I hadn't even parked at that point, so I turned right back down around and give him the highway. And so he calls me and he's just like, well, I'll come to you. I'll drive 40 minutes to you. And, where can we go in your area?
We love a man who can compromise, who can accommodate, who can make arrangements. Let's see how this goes.
So half of me is like, okay, I appreciate the fact that you're trying to make this even, but also now I gotta come up with some plans. And we're still probably gonna have to fucking wait. In my, I live in the suburbs, but still, like, so I'm like, I recognize that I'm frustrated in the moment, and I'm just like, let me take a beat for a second. Let me just, like, I'm getting back on the highway. Let me just think for a second and figure out what my next plan is, because I'm fully dressed, makeup on, whatever.
We love a coping skill. When you feel yourself getting a little, out of sorts, take a beat, take a breath, pull over, think, and see what you want your next move to be. I thought that was smart.
On whatever. And I'm just like, let me take a beat for a second. And so, I'm thinking about just saying, you know what? He's saying that he wants to come off this way. I got a couple spots that I know that we can go to, but like, I just need to take a minute to like cool off. So I was going to just be chill about it or whatever. Then he presses the issue, and it's like basically trying to chastise me for being upset. And that's when I was just, I lost it. Because I'm just like, he was basically like, oh, well, if I had made a reservation and the restaurant was busy, what would you have done? And yeah, I was just like, are you being for real right now? If you made a reservation, we wouldn't have had to wait. If we had a reservation, that is the whole point of the reservation. And I was like, you're not being accountable. And now I'm actually getting mad. Like, I'm actually getting angry because, like, instead of just saying, hey, we crossed wires, I didn't think there was a reservation needed, let's try to figure something out. Like, instead of just leaving it at that, now you trying to act like I'm wrong for being upset. And like, it's not that big of a fucking deal. I really was going to accept his alternative, right? And because I'm really, really trying to, like, be a better human and a better girly, but I consider myself a reasonable person for the most part, but I just could not fucking believe you're sitting here trying to act like, well, what's the big deal? We would have had to wait anyway. No, we wouldn't. That's not the point of the reservation. And so now I'm just like, listen, sir, I'm not trying to get into it with you about this. We can just plan something for another day at this point. Because again, I'm not gonna be a good date to you tonight. I'm really getting upset now. And so like he starts like laughing, like, well, what? I just don't get it. Like, what's the? And I said, so now it's funny to you. I went off the deep end. I'm like, so now it's funny to you. Now it's funny to you that I'm upset about this. So I was just like, you know what? You ain't even got to worry about me, because now you just not being accountable at this point, and now I'm really pissed off. Before, we could have just called it up as a miscommunication, cross wires, whatever. But now I'm pissed off because now you're like damn near making fun of the situation, or like acting like I have no reason to be mad. Well, we would have had to wait anyway. Like, no, take your L and just. I just got interrupted because he just called again. I'm not answering. But then like after that, when I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm actually good on this whole situation, because I don't appreciate the fact that you're like not even taking accountability at this point, and you're like making it seem like it's a problem that I'm upset in the first place. So I'm just like, I'm good on this, enjoy your night. So he ends up texting me, and I'm gonna put the text on here, but he ends up texting me basically like, well, you actually have a right to be angry, but I think you took it too far. And then he sends me a screenshot. I was like, see, the reservation is ready now. Like, see what I mean? Like, see, you're making it a big deal. And then he says again, well, if there was a reservation and they were busy, we still would have had to wait. No, we wouldn't. Do not fucking gaslight me. Just say, take the L. Just take the L.
Okay, I'm going to pause here to say, like, we have to stop using heavy therapeutic language in places where it doesn't belong. Like, I know that gaslight has been, used pretty flippantly in social commentary. This is not necessarily gaslighting. I think that's a little too heavy. Deflection and validation, maybe. But gaslight as a source of like an abuse tactic, let's hold our horses. All right. How does this end, ma'am?
Oh, like, I really was going to give him a chance, but it is what it is at this point. I look cute. I am just gonna grab something that's already ready-made at the grocery store. It is what it is. Like, maybe I'll record some content for y'all, but I'm about to take my ass back in the house. I'm already back on my side of town. He did just call me again. I don't want to talk. And at this point, it's really nothing to say because it's the lack of accountability for me at this point.
All right. Let's share my thoughts. So here's the thing. First of all, I have a gripe about our current dating market. I feel as though not enough people are dating for the sake of actually getting to know someone. And I understand that we all have like our horror stories, and so we come in with different, guards and protections. But I do think that there is a lack of people who, like, we're not all going into it with the intent of getting to know someone, good or bad. Getting to know someone does not mean that it's going to be successful, but putting yourself in the position to gather the information, right? As people say, dating is data, gathering data. In order to gather data, you have to be in the room where it happens, right? You have to be willing to engage. Now, you don't have to be in every room, right? When people show you certain red flags and things like that, you can go, and we can talk about the red flags that were displayed throughout this whole scenario. But I just want to say this in general, that like we can do a lot better with our dating climate to actually be intentional about positioning ourselves to gather the data. That's the first thing. Now, the next thing is she mentioned this in the beginning of the video. And I think that it actually sets the tone for how she responded and before she ever responded, how she was going to respond, right? And what she said was that she is an anxious attachment girly from the beginning. So people who struggle with anxious attachment, and at a point in my life, that was me. People who struggle with anxious attachment have a lot of sensitivity around perceived abandonment, and they have sensitivities about wanting to be and feel chosen and selected, right? And so everything is perceived through that lens. In this case, from the very beginning, she was on edge, and anxious attachment folks tend to be a little bit on edge. It doesn't take much to trigger that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? Those defense mechanisms. And so I said in the beginning that like I think that this whole thing about when we set up a date, you gotta call me the day of. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I think that especially if a man sets a date, I think it's good practice to confirm the day of, right? And in general. But at work, when somebody puts a meeting on my calendar, I don't need 3, 4, 5, 10 reminders or confirmations that meeting is happening, especially if it happened recently. Now, a week out is different. You set a date a week out, I do need you to hit me up that day before. Really, forget the day of. I need you to hit me up the day before, so that way we're like, hey, we're good, But if we made the plans on Wednesday and today is Friday, do we need a double confirmation, right? There's a dating coach that I follow. I'm blanking on her name, but we'll add it right here. And she says that if you and this young lady did that, but if you need confirmation, you feel like you're not getting it, you can send a text. Oh, right? You can send a text and say, hey, looking forward to seeing you later today. A lot of women feel like that takes away from their power. Me personally, I don't feel that way because you can't take something that you don't have access to, right? So I don't feel like it takes away from my power to say, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you later, just as a check. If I feel like that person's not moving in the way that I'm hoping that they would move, it doesn't mean that the person's not excited to see you. I don't think that it would change the outcome of the potential outcome of the date. But if you really need that, reach out, extend that. And so she did follow up. But for people who are like, I'm just not gonna get dressed if I don't get a confirmation, to me that's weird, because like I don't know how many times people have been stood up. Maybe it's because it's not my experience or my clients' experiences, but I've never been stood up for a date, I don't think. And most people don't get stood up. And so the idea that I'm just not going to get dressed, and then when that person calls you and they're there, it's a hot mess. Let's stop doing that. Let's be confident in our confirmations. Like, let's be confident in our engagements and calendar calendar events, right? And just show up where we say we're going to show up. And if somebody doesn't, that's on them. You're not the fool, right? But that anxious attachment showed up really early. And just as an aside, I'm not a attachment expert, but because I deal in relational trauma, one of the key things about attachment, the anxious attachment style, is protest behaviors. And protest behaviors kind of show up as a way to, it's almost like a bid for attention, a bid for connection, but in the wrong way. And so a person with anxious attachment will, instead of saying, hey, can we spend some time together? They might say, like, you don't want to spend time with me. I know you don't want to spend time with me, right? It's really bait to get the other person to be like, of course I do. Like, to really get that positive affirmation, that lock in, to say, like, I do want you, you're desired. But instead they might do things like, well, instead of reaching out to a person, they won't reach out for multiple days because they want to feel reached out to, because that, to them, everything that another person does to them speaks to their personhood or how that person feels about them. And to some extent that's true, right? How people treat you is how they feel about you. But there's so much focus and emphasis on what that other person is doing that you're not in your own body and in your own experience, which is something I talk to my clients about all the time. You cannot be so focused on what a man is doing that you're not noticing how you feel about what a man is doing, right? So instead of like the whole idea of like, oh, he's just not that into you, he doesn't like you, that's his business. Do I like how I'm being treated? Do I feel good when I'm around that person? Do I feel anxious? Am I getting mixed signals that are causing me to feel anxious? Or am I reading certain things the wrong way? Focusing on yourself and your own experience in dating, that is going to alleviate a lot of the confusion that you have and the disconnect that we often have with our bodies as women when it comes to dating. Because again, if you're focusing so much on him, you're not focusing on you and your experiences and making sure that your standards, boundaries, and desires are being met in that engagement. All right. So, red flag. Arguing early in a dating situation is always a red flag. I do not care. You should not be arguing with a man that you barely know. If he is not your man, y'all have nothing to argue about. I'm sorry. Y'all don't. And maybe a month or two into dating, there can be conflict that arises. But if y'all have been, I think she mentioned like they've only been talking for like a week or something like that. I'm not going back and forth. The moment that there's a back to my fourth, I'm done. Like, there's just no reason for us to be arguing because it's too early. And so to me, like, the fact that they even had an argument and they're going back and forth, like, you can have a misunderstanding, but having an argument where you're going back and forth, where you're crashing out, that is, y'all don't need to see each other ever again, right? At that point. The other thing is, your standards can be high, but so can your kindness. You can have high standards and high kindness. And I say that going back to my original point about dating, no longer feeling like people are genuinely trying to gather data. I think that so many people have been caught in their lack of standards and boundaries that they are making everyone pay for it by being hyper vigilant. And that hyper vigilance is not the same as having a high standard. For me, when it comes to realizing that man did not make a reservation, right? You can be mad, stomp away, have a fit, be hangry, all the things. You can do that. Or you can feel secure in yourself enough to say, you know what, I like this person enough. I drove all the way here. I got ready. Let me instead make it clear what my expectations are moving forward, if we are to move forward. Listen, I get it. It's frustrating when somebody doesn't prepare. And by the way, if you're a man watching this, preparation is your best friend. That is always going to give you an edge up in a dating situation. Prepare as much as possible because preparation shows intentionality. And when you're intentional about somebody, they feel that. However, if for whatever reason, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt in this case, I could have said, hey, so just a FYI, in the future when we're going out, I do need us to have reservations. That's just, it helps to make sure that my time is properly accounted for as well as yours. And so we don't have to do all this waiting stuff. Like, we don't want to sit around here and have to walk around the mall, right? But because it seems like she wanted to go on this date, unless she was in heels, right? Maybe walking around the mall would have been a good icebreaker. Because sitting across the table from somebody as a first date can be a little bit jarring for some people. So maybe walking around, being side to side, which research shows is a lot better. You can get to know people side to side better than you can face to face. If you are able to be side by side to do something like walking around the mall, maybe picking out outfits. I've done that on a date before where we picked out things for each other and it was like cool. So I say all that to say, like, be willing to be creative. Somebody's gonna watch me say this, watch this video and say like, oh no, because I got standards, I have this. That's fine. You can have standards, or you can meet people and really engage in dating. Like, excuse me, not or. You can have both, but you don't have to be hyper vigilant and hyper intolerant in order to be clear about what your standards are and are not. Right? So if she wanted to stay, if it wasn't a huge deal breaker for her, she could have been clear about what her expectation is moving forward. And then after that, been like, but yeah, maybe let's just sit in the car because I don't feel like walking around the mall. I'm hangry. Or had him take her to the gas station or to Chick-fil-A or something so she can get something in her stomach while they're waiting for the food. Is that inconvenient? Yes. But you drove 40 minutes to go on a date. Clearly you want to be there. Give yourself and himself a chance to be there, right? Now, my next point. You cannot invalidate somebody's emotions as a mean and think that you're going to get them to connect with you. Men have a really hard time navigating women's emotions sometimes because they simply don't understand them. Your lack of understanding is an opportunity for you to get curious, not to regulate. If you don't understand why she's upset and you feel like it's a bit much, you can process that, but maybe not in a moment where you know you're wrong, because he did admit to being wrong. So invalidating someone's emotions is never going to get you anywhere. Like, just be quiet. Say you're sorry, apologize, give accommodations, and move on. Now, the accommodation that he did give was to follow her back to her area so that way they can find another thing. But to be honest, by then the communication, everything had already broken down. I don't even know why she attempted to still give him a chance, because as she stated, which I appreciate her self-awareness, she wasn't going to be a good date to him. And she was so frustrated and low-key a bit emotionally dysregulated to the point that she really engaged with him in a really like intense manner. But at the point where you felt you needed to go home, you might as well just cut your losses. Trying anyway is really just your attempt to try and salvage something that you kind of know that is already broken. At that point, just cut your losses, right? At the moment that she felt like she wanted to go back to her house, why would we meet for a second date again after that if I'm that offended? But I appreciate that he was willing to accommodate her, but I don't think that was the wisest accommodation. I think he would have been better off being like, hey, look, don't go. Let's wait. But now I know, like, I will be on top of it next time, right? He also could have offered a solution for next time and really soften things with her. Because, he allowed things to escalate by half apologizing, but also invalidating at the same time. Yeah. So listen, my verdict on this whole thing is that they don't ever need to see each other ever again. Now, if I know people like I know people, I bet you they still talking. But I could be wrong, right? Some people, like, I'm not saying that because of something that I read in her. It's just, I know human behavior. A lot of times she may reflect on it later and be like, I was tripping. And, he's going to keep trying because men are really bad at taking L's and keeping it moving. But I don't think they ever need to see each other ever again. I don't think that she had the grace to give, and it may have to do with other things about their engagement that we don't know about. I don't know. I'm not fully convinced that this was the one and only thing, because people don't usually operate like that unless her being hangry is a really intense experience for her. But something tells me that she wasn't, and not to say like you can't be one and done, but something tells me that there was something else about him that she wasn't feeling. And it could have been like this invalidating behavior has shown up before. So I think like just cut your losses for the both of you. Let's just never meet up again. Get some therapy for that anxious attachment, because I'm telling you, when you soften that trigger a little bit more, you're a lot more discerning and pleasant in your dating experiences, and you feel a lot more secure to guide things in the way that you would like for them to go, if that person is willing to be guided. I have no, like, there's nothing wrong with giving feedback. Now, feedback is different than telling somebody things that they should already know, right? For some of you, doing a reservation may feel like something they should already know, but for me, it would be more like if he, I don't know, didn't walk her to her car. Like, oh, I thought you would be fine. No, safety is a thing that you should know and understand, right? So different strokes for different folks, but I don't think y'all should ever see each other again. I do think she needs therapy for that anxious attachment. And sir, please learn how to make a reservation in the future, because preparation is key. So that's my verdict. And I'll see you next time in the Therapist Courtroom.